Okay, let's do a little thought experiment to get us started. I want you to picture a band that has survived everything. And when I say everything, I mean the kind of obstacles that usually destroy a group in a few months, let alone 50 years.
Right, we're not talking about small hurdles here.
No, not at all. We are talking about the death of a charismatic frontman at the absolute peak of their creative powers.
A tragedy that would have ended 99% of bands.
Yeah.
Right then and there.
Absolutely. Then we are talking about the lead guitarist, the very face of the band going deaf.
Literally being told by doctors he could never perform again.
We're talking about the drummer getting arrested for some incredibly serious charges. I mean, it sounded like a plot from a crime novel.
It's a resume of disasters that would have ended almost anyone else.
Exactly. And you also have to factor in the silent killers of bands. Things like early onset dementia for the founder and rhythm guitarist.
And just changing musical trends. I mean, think about it. Disco, punk, grunge, pop.
Internal feuds. Yet through all of that, for over 5 decades, this band hasn't just survived, they haven't changed.
Not really, no.
They are the immovable object of rock and roll history. And we are talking, of course, about AC/DC.
The Titans of Thunder from Down Under. And you're absolutely right about that immovable description.
It feels like the only word for it.
It really is. I was looking at the numbers while we were preparing our sources for this discussion, and it's actually hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale of their operation. We're talking about over 200 million records sold.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
Okay, so put that into perspective for us. Where does that land them in the hierarchy of music history? Are we talking like Beatles territory?
It's just shy of the Beatles, but, and this is the amazing part, they are comfortably ahead of massive solo acts like Elton John or Mariah Carey and bands like the Rolling Stones.
Wow, head of the Stones.
In the United States alone, they've shifted 84 million albums. And if you look at just one album, Back in Black.
Just one.
That single album is the second best-selling album in human history.
Right behind Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Exactly.
That is insane to think about. A hard rock band. A really hard rock band.
Yeah.
Sitting right next to the king of pop.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this exploration isn't just to, list their sales statistics.
No.
We have a stack of sources here. Biographies, tour histories, even some legal documents. And we're going to try to answer one specific question.
How?
How does a band that plays what critics often call simple music, wears the same Schoolboy outfit, and sings about the same topics for 50 years? How do they manage to stay relevant when everyone else just fades away?
I love that framing. That's the core of it all. And I think to answer how, we have to look at where. Because they have this massive stadium-filling reputation now, and the logo looks like it was carved out of steel, but the origin story is surprisingly domestic.
It's very humble. It starts in a living room, not in some, industrial factory.
So take us back to Sydney, November 1973. You have the young brothers, Malcolm and Angus. They're putting a band together, and they need a name that just screams power, high voltage, danger. I'm assuming they looked at a power plant or a lightning storm for inspiration.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Especially given the imagery they eventually adopted. But no, they were looking at their sister's sewing machine.
We're kidding. A sewing machine.
It's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Margaret Young is actually this sort of unsung hero of the AC/DC mythology in so many ways.
Clearly.
She was at home, likely working on some clothes, and she just pointed out the symbol on the back of the AC adapter for her machine.
Right.
It said AC/DC.
Which for the non-electricians listening stands for what exactly?
Alternating current/direct current. It describes how electricity is delivered and converted from one form to another.
Okay.
But for the brothers, they didn't care about the physics of it. They didn't care about the appliance. They saw the symbol, which often features a lightning bolt or a slash, and they just felt it perfectly captured what they wanted to do musically.
Raw power.
Raw, unprocessed energy. A power-driven performance. That was the idea.
Yeah. It's such a perfect accident. I mean, if she had owned a different brand of sewing machine, rock history could be totally different. We might be sitting here discussing a band called Singer or Brother.
It certainly lacks the same edge, doesn't it?
It really does.
And there's a linguistic detail here that I find fascinating. If you're in the United States or the UK, you pronounce it AC/DC.
Right.
But if you're in their home country of Australia, you rarely hear that full pronunciation.
So what do they say?
They're known colloquially as Aka Daka.
Aka Daka. That sounds very Australian.
It's a classic Australian diminutive. They tend to shorten words and add an O or an A, or in this case, a K to the end. It's really a term of endearment. It shows that the band belongs to the people, you know?
That makes sense. Okay, so we have the name and we have the concept of power, but the visual identity, that took a little longer to finalize.
He did.
The logo that everyone knows, that heavy Gothic lettering with the lightning bolts splitting the AC and the DC, that wasn't there on day one.
No, that came a bit later. The iconic logo was designed by an American typographer named Gerard Huerta. It didn't actually appear until 1977.
77, okay.
On the international version of the album, Let There Be Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And it was designed specifically to convey that sense of electricity that was implicit in the name. Before that, their visual branding was, well, it was a bit all over the place.
Speaking of being all over the place, let's talk about the band's image when they first formed in late 73. Because if you look at photos from that era, they do not look like the AC/DC we know.
Not at all.
The original lineup was Malcolm and Angus, Colin Burgess on drums, Larry Van Crete on bass, and a vocalist named Dave Evans. And I found a photo in the notes here that I frankly don't know how to process.
I think I know the one you mean.
It looks like AC/DC, but it looks like they raided a costume shop in the dark.
Yes. The glam era.
People think of AC/DC as these blue-collar guys in T-shirts and jeans and the school uniform, obviously. But you're telling me there was a time when they were wearing satin?
And platform boots.
Yeah.
And makeup. You have to understand the context of the Australian music scene in the early to mid-1970s. The biggest bands were acts like Skyhooks and Sherbet.
Right. Very theatrical.
It was all very colorful, very theatrical, very glam rock. And AC/DC was a new band. You know, they were trying to figure out where they fit in. So for about 18 months, they tried to fake it. Most of the band dressed in some form of satin outfit or glam gear.
And this is where we get the gorilla story.
This is the gorilla story. So Angus Young, the guitar icon we all know, was experimenting with his stage persona. He tried a Zorro outfit, complete with the mask and the cape.
I can't even picture that.
He tried a Superman suit.
Yeah.
And yes, at one point he went on stage in a full gorilla costume.
I'm trying to visualize Angus Young playing those blues riffs in a gorilla suit. It feels like a fever dream.
It was a period of frantic experimentation. And thank goodness for Margaret Young again.
The sister with the sewing machine.
The very same. She looked at Angus, who's a pretty small guy and very young looking. And she said, effectively, you act like a child. You might as well dress like one.
And she suggested he wear his school uniform.
She did.
Wait, was it his actual uniform from his school?
Originally, yes. Yeah. It was his blazer from Asheville Boys High School. Later on, of course, they had them custom made to be more durable for touring. But the first one was his real clothes.
That's incredible.
And the irony is, it wasn't meant to be cool in a rock star sense. It was a gimmick. But when he got on stage and started sweating and thrashing around, that uniform took on this kind of menacing, possessed quality. It just worked.
But the rest of the band was still in satin during this transition.
Exactly. And that was the source of the friction. You had this pub rock sound developing, which is gritty, sweaty, beer-soaked music.
Right.
Being played by guys who were dressed like they were in a glam pop band. It confused the audience.
I can imagine.
They'd show up to these rough pubs in Melbourne or Sydney, and the crowd would just stare at them. Not sure if they were supposed to dance or maybe fight them.
The band had a manager at the time, Dennis Laughlin, and it seems like he was pushing for this glam image. But the pivot point seems to be when they got involved with Michael Browning, a veteran promoter in Melbourne.
Browning was instrumental. Absolutely. He booked them at the Hard Rock Cafe, but he immediately felt the image was wrong. And significantly, he also felt Dave Evans was the wrong singer.
Why was that?
Evans had more of a glam rock style, a bit more of a pop voice, and he clashed with the manager. But Browning saw the potential in the Young brothers' guitar playing. He saw the engine there.
So when does he come on board officially?
It happened when the band found themselves struck in Adelaide with no money. Their previous manager had quit, and they were stranded. They hired Browning right then and there.
And this is where the real shift happens.
Yes. They decided to abandon the glam image entirely. They stripped it all back. No more satin. They decided to pursue a harder pub rock sound.
We should probably clarify what pub rock means in an Australian context because it is a very specific genre.
It is. It's a harder, more aggressive blues rock style. It was pioneered by acts like Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs, and it's music made to be played live in loud, hot, crowded environments where the audience demands energy.
Working class music.
It's absolutely working class music. And to execute this shift, they needed a different kind of frontman. Dave Evans was let go, and this opened the door for one of the most significant figures in rock history.
Enter Bon Scott. And the way he entered the band is just as legendary as the sewing machine story.
It really is.
He wasn't scouted from some rival superstar band. He was actually working for the band, but in a totally different capacity.
That's right. He was the band's chauffeur.
A driver.
The driver. Now, Bon Scott had a musical background, of course. He'd been with a pop band called the Valentines and a prog rock band called Fraternity. But by September 1974, he was recovering from a pretty bad motorcycle accident and was driving the band around Adelaide to make some money.
And how did he get from the driver's seat to the microphone?
He was introduced to George Young, that's Angus and Malcolm's older brother and their producer, by a former bandmate of his. He got an audition.
And he brought a very different energy compared to Dave Evans.
Completely different. Scott was born in Scotland and emigrated to Australia as a child, just like the Young brothers. He was older than them, he'd lived a bit harder, he brought a working-class style, a boogie rock sound, and what is so often described as this earthy humor.
He solidified their identity.
He was the final piece of the puzzle. He made them a street-level rock band.
And things moved very quickly once Bon Scott was on the microphone. They re-recorded the vocals for their debut single, and then they recorded their first studio album, High Voltage, in just 10 days.
10 days in November 1974. That speed is so characteristic of their early era. They were hungry.
So High Voltage and the follow-up, TNT, were released only in Australasia at first.
That's right. They were building a reputation on the live circuit, just playing anywhere and everywhere that would have them.
And we have to mention the visuals that accompanied this era. In December of 75, they filmed the video for It's a Long Way to the Top, if you want to rock and roll, for the Australian TV show Countdown.
That is the famous video of them playing on the back of a flatbed truck.
Driving right down the middle of the street.
Precisely. They were driving down Swanston Street in Melbourne. You've got the bagpipes, you've got the whole band playing while traffic is just going by. It's such an iconic piece of Australian rock history because it captured the reality of the band at that time. They were literally on the street playing for the people.
But while they were conquering Australia, the international stage was a completely different beast. In 1976, they signed with Atlantic Records and moved to London, and the timing was, well, it was complicated.
Because 1976 in London means one thing.
Punk rock.
Punk rock.
Right. You had the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Damned. The whole aesthetic was safety pins, torn clothes, and anarchy.
Exactly. Punk was just exploding. And the British music press, particularly publications like NME and Melody Maker, they tried to categorize AC/DC as a punk band.
Because they were loud and aggressive.
Right. But the band absolutely hated punk rock. Hated it. They viewed it as a passing fad. They were blues rock purists at heart. They were musicians who prided themselves on their proficiency, whereas punk was often about deconstructing that proficiency.
It creates this interesting tension. They're complete outsiders in the UK scene.
They were. But despite that friction, or maybe even because of it, they started gaining traction. They toured the UK relentlessly on the Lock Up Your Daughters tour.
They broke into the European market.
And eventually, they hit the US stadium circuit, supporting massive acts like Kiss and Aerosmith. They were just winning crowds over by sheer force of performance, night after night.
But the artistic peak of this era, and really the album that broke them globally, was Highway to Hell.
Highway to Hell, released in 1979. This was the moment everything finally came together.
A total game changer.
It was. And it was produced by Robert John Mutt Lange. This is a crucial detail because Lange brought a level of polish to the production without sacrificing any of the power.
So he tightened things up.
He tightened up the songwriting, he worked on the vocal harmonies, the backing vocals. The lyrics shifted slightly away from the purely comical towards more central anthemic rock themes. It became their first album to reach the US Top 20.
This is the one that put them in the big leagues.
It propelled them into the top ranks of hard rock acts. They were on the absolute verge of becoming the biggest band in the world.
So 1979 ends. Highway to Hell is a smash hit. They have finally cracked America. They are, by all metrics, about to become the biggest band on Earth. And then we get to February 19th, 1980.
The day everything just stopped.
Walk us through that night, because there's a lot of rumor and mythology around it, but the actual facts are just sad.
They're tragic in their banality. Bon Scott is in London. He goes out for a night of drinking at a club called the Music Machine.
Okay.
He's with an acquaintance guy named Alistair Kinnear. And it's a pretty standard night out for Bon, heavy drinking, having a laugh.
But he falls asleep on the ride home.
Right. He passes out in Kinnear's car. Kinnear drives him back to his flat. But he can't wake Bon up. He's a big guy, just dead weight.
So what does he do?
Thinking he's just sleeping it off, which, Bon had done 100 times before.
Yeah.
Kidder reclines the seat, throws a blanket over him, and leaves him in the car to sleep.
And it's February in London. It is freezing cold.
It's freezing.
Yeah.
And when Kinnear comes back the next evening, and we're talking almost 24 hours later, he finds Bond exactly where he left him, but he's not breathing.
Oh, no.
They rush him to King's College Hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival.
He was only 33 years old.
33. The official cause of death was death by misadventure, involving acute alcohol poisoning. But really, it was just the lifestyle finally catching up to him. And for the band, I mean, you have to imagine this. You aren't just losing your singer.
No.
Malcolm and Angus were losing a brother.
I read that they didn't even talk about the band at the funeral. They just assumed it was over.
They did. Malcolm, in particular, was ready to pack it in. He just felt that AC/DC was Bond's god. That swagger, that humor, you can't replace that.
So what changed? Why didn't they quit?
It was Bond's parents.
Yeah.
It's a truly remarkable part of the story. After the funeral, Bond's father pulls Malcolm aside and says, essentially, Bond loved this band. He wouldn't want you to stop. You have to keep going.
Wow.
That blessing was the only reason they even considered auditioning a new singer.
The audition process for Bon Scott's replacement has its own mythology, too. The press was tossing around all these names like Noddy Holder from Slade.
All sorts of rumors.
But the band brought in a guy named Brian Johnson, who was the singer for a band called Geordie.
And Brian Johnson impressed them immediately. The story goes he sang Ike and Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits and then Whole Lotta Rosie. But there is this fascinating connection here, almost a twist of fate.
What's that?
Bon Scott himself had actually praised Brian Johnson to Angus Young years earlier.
Wait, really? Bon knew about him.
He had seen him perform. Scott had seen Johnson playing with Geordie and told Angus that he was a guy full of life. He apparently compared him to Little Richard.
So in a way, Scott had given his approval before he even passed.
In a way, yes. It's an incredible detail.
So Johnson is hired in April 1980. They go to the Bahamas to record at Compass Point Studios. They're working with Mutt Lange again. And the conditions were not exactly paradise.
No, not at all. Tropical storms were battering the island constantly, knocking out the power. It really adds to the atmosphere of the record when you think about it. Brian Johnson recalls trying to write lyrics while thunder is literally shaking the building.
And the result of that is Back in Black, released in July 1980.
Dedicated to Bon Scott's memory. The album cover is all black for that reason, a sign of mourning.
The commercial impact of this record is just staggering. As we mentioned, it became the second best-selling album of all time. It spent, what was it?
612 weeks on the Billboard 200 chart.
Over a decade.
It's unbelievable. You have tracks like Hell's Bells, which starts with that ominous tolling bell, You Shook Me All Night Long, and the title track. It didn't just save the band, it elevated them to a level of commercial success that very few artists ever achieve.
And they followed it up quickly. For those about to rock, we salute you came out in 1981.
And that album became their first to reach #1 on the Billboard 200 in the United States.
So by the end of 81, they are arguably the biggest rock band on the planet.
Without a doubt. But, as is so often the case in these long narratives, what goes up must eventually come down, or at least hit some turbulence. And the mid-'80s brought a period of exactly that.
This brings us to the departure of Phil Rudd, the drummer. This wasn't just a simple, I'm leaving the band situation.
No, it was volatile. Very messy. Phil Rudd had been dealing with long-term drug and alcohol issues for a while. His friendship with Malcolm Young, which was once very close, deteriorated to the point where it escalated into a physical confrontation.
A fist fight.
A literal fist fight. He was fired midway through the recording of the Flick of the Switch album in 1983. He was replaced by a drummer named Simon Wright.
And musically, the critics started to turn on them a bit during this period.
They did. The albums Flick of the Switch in 83 and Fly on the Wall in 85 were considered by many critics to be uninspired or underdeveloped.
Why was that? What was the thinking?
Well, the band had decided to produce Flick of the Switch themselves. They wanted to move away from the polish of Mutt Lange and get back to a more raw, basic sound.
Back to their roots.
Exactly. But it just didn't connect commercially in the same way. There was a famous critique at the time where a reviewer stated they had made the same album 9 times.
That is a harsh line.
It is, but it reflected a growing sentiment at the time.
But they found a way to stay relevant. In 1986, they connected with pop culture through cinema.
Yes, the album Who Made Who. It served as the soundtrack for Stephen King's film Maximum Overdrive.
Which he directed himself.
Right. And while the film itself had let's say, a mixed reception.
That's putting it politely.
It is. But the album kept AC/DC on the radio. The title track was a new song, and it was packaged with their hits. It really bridged the gap during that slump.
The real resurgence, though, the moment they proved they were still absolute titans, came in 1990.
The Razor's Edge.
And Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck. The opening riff alone is iconic. That album introduced the band to a whole new generation. By this time, Chris Slade was on drums.
And the tour for this album included one of the most significant concerts in history.
The Monsters of Rock show in Moscow, September 1991.
This was right around the collapse of the Soviet Union.
It was shortly after the failed II attempt. The political climate was incredibly tense, and this is the first open-air rock concert in the former Soviet Union. They played to an estimated crowd of 1.6 million people.
1.6 million. Just try to visualize that.
You can't. It's a sea of people as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
It's a visual testament to the global reach of their music, that it could unite people in a moment of such historic change.
However, that tour was also marred by a real tragedy. In January of '91, at a concert in Salt Lake City, 3 fans were crushed to death when the crowd surged towards the stage.
That's a horrific event. It deeply, deeply affected the band. The accounts from that night are harrowing. It took 26 minutes before security, and the band understood the severity of what was happening and stopped the show.
They must have been devastated.
Completely. They settled out of court with the victims' families, but it remains a very somber note in their legacy. They were just gutted that their music, which is about having a good time, led to something so awful.
As we move into the mid-90s, we see a return to the classic lineup. Phil Rudd came back in 1994.
He did. Angus and Malcolm invited Rudd to jam with them, and eventually he was rehired. The chemistry was still there.
And that led to the Ballbreaker album in 1995.
Produced by Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
And then came Stiff Upper Lip in 2000. These albums cemented their status as legacy giants. They weren't necessarily breaking new ground, but they were delivering exactly what their audience wanted, and they were doing it incredibly well.
Let's jump forward to 2008. We get Black Ice. And the distribution model for this was quite unique for the time.
It was, yeah. In the U.S., it was sold exclusively through Walmart, Sam's Club, and the band's official website.
Which was a big gamble, cutting out a lot of retailers.
It was a huge gamble.
Yeah.
But despite that limited retail footprint, it reached #1 in 29 countries. It was the second highest-selling record of 2008 worldwide. It just proved that the demand for AC/DC was still astronomical.
But the years following Black Ice began to take a heavy, heavy toll on the band members themselves. We have to talk about Malcolm Young.
This is the real heartbreak of the later years. In April 2014, it was announced that Malcolm was ill and would be taking a break.
He'd had health issues before, right?
Yes, he'd been diagnosed with lung cancer previously, which was treated successfully, and he had a pacemaker fitted for a heart condition. But the devastating news was his diagnosis of dementia. He retired from the band he founded.
He passed away in 2017.
November 2017, a huge loss for the music world.
And during the same window of time, Phil Rudd found himself in serious legal trouble in New Zealand.
In November 2014, Rudd was charged with threatening to kill and possession of methamphetamine and cannabis. It was a major scandal. He eventually pleaded guilty to the lesser charges and was sentenced to 8 months of home detention.
And he was replaced for the tour.
Chris Slade came back to fill in for the Rock or Bust tour.
And the hits just kept coming. In 2016, Brian Johnson, the voice of the band for 36 years, was told he had to stop.
Doctors ordered him to stop touring immediately. The risk was total, permanent deafness. This left the band with 10 dates remaining on their North American tour.
And in one of the most surreal moments in rock history, they recruited Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses to fill in.
Axl Rose fronting AC/DC. It sounds like fan fiction, but it happened.
And then, as if that weren't enough, Cliff Williams, the bassist since 1977, retired at the end of that tour.
It really felt like the band was finally done. Angus was the sole original member left touring. The engine had seemingly run out of steam.
It did seem like the end. But then, in 2020, we got a surprise. A full-on reunion.
A reunion. Brian Johnson, Phil Rudd, and Cliff Williams all returned to record the album Power Up.
This album was a tribute to Malcolm, wasn't it?
Explicitly so. The recording process used songwriting ideas and riffs that Malcolm had worked on with Angus before his health deteriorated. So even though he wasn't there physically, his musical DNA was all over that record. It's a true tribute.
And that brings us to the present day. We're looking at the 2024 to 2026 timeline. The band is active.
They are. A tour was announced in February 2024. However, the lineup has some nuances.
What do you mean?
While Phil Rudd and Cliff Williams recorded the Power Up album, they aren't touring this time around. Matt Lagg is on drums, and Chris Chaney, formerly of Jane's Addiction, has replaced Williams on bass for the tour.
So it continues, but with a different rhythm section on the road.
Exactly. And they're also celebrating their 50th anniversary with gold vinyl reissues of their entire catalog throughout 2024.
I want to pause the history lesson for a second and get under the hood. Because we say AC/DC is simple, critics say it's simple, but I've heard cover bands try to play Back in Black, and it never sounds right. It always sounds loose or thin. Why is that? What is the mechanism here?
That is the million-dollar question. It's the simple is hard paradox. If you look at the sheet music, a child could probably play the notes, but the feel, that is a machine, a very precise machine.
Okay, so break that machine down for me. What are the components?
Okay, imagine a piston engine. The drummer, whether it's Phil Rudd, Simon Wright, or Chris Slade, is the heartbeat. But Rudd specifically has this unique style. He typically strikes the kick drum on the first and third beats and the snare on the second and fourth.
The whack, boom whack.
Exactly. But, and this is key, he does it slightly behind the beat.
Behind the beat?
Yeah, it's called the drag. He waits the tiniest fraction of a second later than you'd expect to hit that snare. It makes the music feel heavy, like it's pulling you backward. It gives it that signature swagger.
Okay, so you have this heavy, dragging drum beat. What about the bass?
Then you have Cliff Williams on bass. He locks in with the drummer's right foot with the kick drum. And he plays eighth notes dun 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 relentlessly. He's the cement holding the foundation together.
So that leaves the guitars.
Right, and this is the secret sauce that most people miss. It's the interplay between the two brothers, Malcolm and Angus.
The engine room.
You have Malcolm Young on rhythm guitar. He was playing these giant open chords with really thick strings. And he was hitting them hard. It was almost percussive. He used a Marshall Superbass headset to a clean but incredibly loud setting. So there was very little distortion on his rhythm guitar. It was just loud and clear.
And Angus?
Angus floats on top of all that. While Malcolm and the rhythm section are holding down the fort, this immovable object, Angus is playing with this nervous, frenzied energy. So you have this massive, solid, heavy rhythm, and then this chaotic lead guitar just sprinting over the top of it.
That tension.
That tension between the heavy and the fast, that is the sound of AC/DC.
So if a cover band tries to speed it up, or if the drummer gets too fancy with fills,
the whole house of cards just falls down. It stops sounding like a rock band and starts sounding like a mess. Malcolm Young used to say, "I'm the engine room," and he absolutely meant it.
There's also this constant debate. Is it heavy metal? Is it hard rock? Where do they fit?
It's a long-standing debate. While they are often categorized as heavy metal, and they certainly influence the genre tremendously, the band has always insisted they are simply rock and roll.
Just rock and roll.
Musically, the expert consensus leans toward hard rock. Their songs are constructed on straightforward major and minor power chords. They don't typically use the modal scales and harmonic structures that characterize heavy metal. It's all blues-based at its core.
We also have to address the controversies. We touched on them, but there was a very specific and dark incident in the 1980s involving the serial killer known as the Night Stalker.
This was the case of Richard Ramirez in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When he was arrested, he claimed that the song Night Prowler from Highway to Hell had driven him to murder.
And the media ran with it.
Oh, they went into a frenzy. Police claimed he was wearing an AC/DC shirt and left an AC/DC hat at a crime scene. The press started analyzing the lyrics, claiming AC/DC stood for Antichrist Devil's Child. It was a moral panic.
How did the band respond to something like that?
They were horrified by the association with Ramirez, absolutely horrified. They defended their lyrics, particularly Night Prowler, as being about a boy sneaking into his girlfriend's bedroom at night, a classic rock and roll trope, not about murder. They have always maintained that their lyrics are bawdy humor or have prankster vibes, and they're not meant to be taken literally or seriously.
Despite the critics and the controversies, the legacy is just undeniable. We mentioned the sales, but the cultural footprint is everywhere.
It is. In 2003, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In Madrid, there is a street named Calle de AC/DC. The plaque was apparently stolen so many times, the municipality had to start selling official replicas.
That's amazing.
In Melbourne, you have AC/DC Lane. It's part of the fabric of these cities.
And their influence on other artists is just massive.
It really spans the spectrum.
Yeah.
You have bands like Metallica, Nirvana, The Cult, all citing them as a primary influence. But then you have the Wiggles.
The children's entertainers.
The very same. In 2009, AC/DC actually displaced the Wiggles as Australia's top entertainment earner. That's an amusing statistic that shows their incredible reach. They prove that sticking to a formula, refining it, and perfecting it can create a truly timeless brand.
It really is a story of survival, just unbelievable survival, surviving death, deafness, dementia, legal crises, and 50 years of changing trends.
If we try to connect this to the bigger picture, AC/DC represents this rare constant in an ever-changing world. In a culture that is absolutely obsessed with reinvention and changing your image,
Right.
they found their power in consistency, they identified what they were good at, and they never, ever apologized for it.
A singular vision that has lasted half a century. Thanks for listening.